Hello everybody, this is Tigitar here. Welcome back to part 3 of the Tigaria time-lapse series. Continuing off from last time, and we're gonna carry on through today, all the way through the creation of the storage room and crafting area that I have. So I'm actually pretty excited. I remember this section being kind of one of my favorites to build, probably. It was one that was especially unplanned because this part, specifically these big pillars that support the trees that then support the main core, I had to kind of come up with what they were going to be because I needed some kind of support down below. So it was kind of my first idea that I thought would work, and started jotting out the prototype, I guess. And so starting with just the block profile, I wanted generally smooth, kind of a more blended textures, and pretty dark for like a dark basalt column, like a big pillar or something like that. And so I started trying out different things, and with black painted smooth marble plus smooth sandstone was the main base that I did for the whole like body of the rock itself. And then that worked out pretty good, but I did want to add a little bit more texture. So I bring in, I think I use a little bit of gray paint on the smooth granite blocks, because with black they're just way too dark and you don't get the little sparkly texture out of them. So that added another little bit to it. But then in order to finally add a little bit of roughness, I did add regular granite, which doesn't blend with the other blocks. And because of that, I had to add walls behind to make sure that no light seeped through if lighting got weird. But that the regular granite, I did actually use just black paint, so it's pretty dark and adds that sort of occasional rugged, rough texture to it. And then I did add a few little ledges of grass along the outside and inside, mainly just a bunch of stone walls to start with. And I think I add a few different textures here and there. Maybe not. I actually might just leave stone walls. I don't remember for sure. But you will notice that the interior of the pillar is just like big and hollow as of right now. But I did want to fill it with something. I just didn't totally know exactly what yet. But I wanted to sketch out and build in the other 3 pillars to start with, since I was already in the groove for this texture. I kind of like doing that in general. If I'm building multiple of a similar thing, I'll kind of build them all in stages together, which makes sense for a lot of reasons. I'm sure most people do that too. You just grab your block palette and continue with the similar blocks over and over so that you don't have to switch out your inventory continuously. Although in this case, I did, you'll notice, add in the granite before finishing out the rest of the filling with the marble. And my idea with that was it would be easier to see, and what I could do in order to fill out the rest of it, I can just turn block swap off and then pretty easily just go and fill the rest of it in without having to worry about replacing the blocks that I had already put there. And that worked out pretty nice too. I think it was a slightly more efficient way to do it overall. Beef up the underground bit a little bit down there, and then basically pillar number 2 was sketched out there. I obviously didn't go for perfect symmetry because I wanted that organic shape to it and to all 4 of the pillars, but I did obviously mirror the general size and capacity of all the pillars, I guess. And then the center two, or obviously these are much shorter than the others. I still had this large sort of dish shape crater that I had planned to build the whole, to cradle the whole core of the base in. And that kind of allowed the slopes on the outsides to gently curve up, but still obviously have a lot more distance between that part of the ground and the outside edges of the oval frame. So then I did need to start planning ahead a little bit as I got the center bottom involved. And so I started making some measurements and trying to figure out what size and shape I wanted to start working with for the crafting area and storage room. So I got kind of figured out how much space I had, and then just thought of some odd shaped designs that might fit there, I guess. So to start with, I went back to my classic curves, my oval and circle shapes, and jotted out the start of what I imagined to be kind of the crafting zone down in the bottom. Then it was time to start, getting back underground and digging, clearing out areas. I wanted my crafting area to be at the level surface, or maybe just underground, and that way the storage room could fit nicely below it and be completely tucked in the underground layer, and that would leave me as much room as possible with the surface above ground to have the different other builds, the main part of the base and displays and all that. So I kind of figured out the initial area for the crafting area, and then I started picked the middle out, and I spent a good amount of time with on pencil and paper. I figured out how many crafting stations, like the main core ones, that I wanted to have access to readily from the center point, and then sketched out a grid of how many I could reach and the best way to orient them and stuff. So you'll see as I get to that part, but I basically designed it all ahead of time, and then I went and built it in using the floating furniture trick for most of the crafting stations, using teleporters, and that allowed me to get a lot more compact. I didn't need platforms or blocks to rest most of the furniture items on. I kind of got figured out the color I wanted for this mid oval frame here, and then with actuating it, it darkened it up quite a lot. So that was my final goal, was to have it actuated and just provide visually a frame structure. I didn't actually want it enclosed that much, because I still had the pillars on either side that provided a little bit of structure, and then underneath I did want to just open so that I could have easiest access down to the crafting area and all that. And I don't think at this point I had thought about the shape or the size of the crafting, or not crafting, the storage area down below. That's what I meant to say. But at this point, I don't think I had put any thought into how big or what shape I was going to try to make the storage room. I just knew I wanted it to be set directly beneath where we are now. But I'll get to that before long. Now that I had the shape of the space I wanted for crafting, I went ahead and finished up the rest of the the pillars here, the basalt columns. Although the center two are, I don't know if I would call them columns. They're kind of short and stubby, but I guess they're still taller than they are wide, that's for sure, but not as column-like as the outside. Which even those, they've got a pretty organic feel. They're not very strictly straight or smooth, so it's hard for me to even call them proper columns. They're more like, kind of like monoliths, I guess, just large chunks. So get the interiors started to work on here. Had to make a few minor modifications to even out the sizing of them. Then added I think I just added little bits of grass to every flat surface part on the sides of the monolith / columns, and that worked out really good. I actually really liked the grass color and how it contrasted with the color and texture of the rock. I think it really added a lot of character in a small amount of detail. So that worked out really good. And then sooner or later I needed to start figuring out how I wanted to do the interiors. Oh, and it was also time to move the NPCs out. So I went up to the sky, built a new little storage space for the NPCs to hang out in. Perfectly suited for any amount of NPCs. Well, as long as it's like 10 or less. Then, oh yeah, you might see me occasionally jump over to the trivia section there. I think I had to go visit the guide and ask him how to craft something briefly. I definitely used a lot of hammering tricks and things to figure out what kind of blended texture I wanted at that little transition between the pillar and my purple frame. At first I hammered every block on the rock face, and then I kind of had to decide whether I wanted to smooth that out more or what I liked. I think I just ended up leaving it smooth in the end. That looked the best. So, and then I did still want the base to be explorable, right, for even a new character without any rods of discord or special mobility accessories. So in order to get from the center down here in the purple crafting area, I did want doorways and walkways to get through the pillars, and ended up just making some simple little actuated doorways to allow for travel of any character to walk along through. And then I did add activation switch for these from the center hub or down like in the crafting zone. Finally realized that I didn't want to go with the stone walls after all, so tear those all out and start actually I just started building and designing some structure inside. And this was when I kind of started to get the idea, and I think I actually started with this monolith here, or this column, and I wanted it to be sort of like a mini abandoned outpost or small settlement from some ancient civilization, perhaps, where they had come in and basically made a settlement inside of the monolith, and their goal had been to mine and extract the valuable green energy and resource that is actually part of the the green that powers the rest of the base and the world itself. I should really come up with a term for that, like the chi or something of Tigaria. But anyway, my first idea here in this for the first pillar was to create a little assortment of mining houses and little hanging pathways to get from house to house, along with a few drill units and mining units that they had built in order to extract these resources. And after working, they did deplete this monolith of the resources, and so it's kind of it's not vibrant like the others will be later. And eventually the people in the civilization moved on and left, but you can still find their perfectly well preserved housing system and a few pathways. So the main thing obviously here that I spent a lot of time on at first was this big drill unit right in the center. So I wanted that to be kind of the main piece of the old civilization, was this big drill that they had designed up, and then started playing around with various minecart tracks, chains, platforms, and actuated blocks to try to create a lot of depth and also still allow it to be explorable. So I didn't want to block off a big section with a bamboo beam, so I was able to actuate it, paint it brown, and that, it works really good actually to create a crosswise beam like that that's visually set into the background, and you can still travel in front of it. So that works out really good. Had the first little house sketched out down there to the right, and then I just needed to come up with some more, so I built a little bits of the monolith in and sort of melded a couple little rooms into it, so they kind of mesh into the monolith. Some natural looking platforms along here, and I kind of forgot that I did that. I built interior natural platforms for different things to go on. I used quite a few different blocks and beams and walls and stuff, which definitely added to it. It gives it more of a rugged feel and like an ancient, or well, it's not really that ancient, but a prospecting population had come in and just used whatever resources and materials they could find and had on access to throw together their houses, their platforms, and their machinery. So I tried to build a second little drill unit, a smaller one, that had been drilling on this little chlorophyte vein or chi vein or whatever. Oh yeah, I think my idea with this house here was that it had fallen off of the its support that it had originally rested on, and so it fell and swung down to the side and was now still attached but just hanging sideways, not really very usable. And then tucked another little tiny 2-story house at the very top. Then I did add quite a few little patches of chlorophyte here and there, But one of the things I kind of wanted in the end was I wanted the interior of these pillars to be isolated and invisible most of the time. So as far as like all my large screenshots of the world and of the base, the whole interior of the pillars are just black. So you can't actually see any of this unless you flip the switch to open the doors and explore, and then in each of the pillars there's a little switch at the very bottom that turns on the lights inside that sort of reveal everything that's going on. Which on the first one here, I think activates a few of the lights in the old little houses here and various things along the pathway, and then lights up the two main pieces of drilling machinery that they had too. But importantly, it does not add like glowing life to the chlorophyte patches themselves, whereas in the other three monoliths or columns or whatever, I do have actually an emerald gem spark attached in with some of the chlorophyte sections, and so when you turn those on, it really brings a cool vibrant green energy to life. But again, it's kind of one of the secrets to Tigaria that you only get from exploring. Pretty much got to the point where I wanted it though, so I had like the houses all sketched out and moved on to furnishing. Oh yeah, and then I did add a few water features. I added water features to each of the monoliths, I believe, and that definitely helped add that, I don't know, moisture and ambience to it. Even just the sound actually is kind of nice to have with the little waterfall. And then it was on to just the rest of the furniture. So added a bunch of various little workstations, some beds, some basic furnishings in the houses, and just went along with that. Actually, this is one of the few places that I used a fair amount of spooky furniture. Although most of it is painted either like black or gray, but I felt like the unique textures of the furniture fit for what I wanted in here, and it worked pretty good. So, oh, that's what I had. I actually have a master switch there that turns on and off the big drill unit. That's right. But I think I do have a switch down for the overall lighting sequence of the houses. Which, importantly, that one house that fell sideways, the lantern is still in there, but it's always going to be off. You can't turn it on. I forgot I did that too. I even put a skeleton in there. That's funny. Yeah, overall kind of a cobwebby, spooky theme. And come to think of it, I wonder if I add any cobwebs in here. That would have been something I definitely should have done if I didn't. Especially in the fallen, the broken house. There I go, wiring it all up, so now I can turn the lights on and off. And then I moved on to the other pillar, and I think around now I realized that I didn't want to do every pillar that with that much, well, not that much detail, but with that level of, extravagance, I guess. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I didn't need part of that little civilization in every one of the monoliths. So in the other three, I wanted them to be more preserved, and I really wanted to display the energies within. And so I added much more chlorophyte, kept that organic feel and shape to the inner structure. And then I also added the waterfalls, only this time when it flows over gemspark blocks, you can change the color of the waterfall. So that turned out to be really cool as well. I had a lot of fun flowing the bright neon waterfalls through the interiors. And then I guess actually, yeah, so in the end of it, I scrapped the original stone wall that I was going to use, stone wall, and just went with black painted smooth marble mixed with some regular marble, and then some smooth granite. I believe it's just those three, but it could be wrong. Get the rest of the wall filled in, and then the what I added on top of the basic chlorophyte was sort of the organic part. So I added some furnishing in the shape of plants, and then I also I wanted it a little bit more full, so I ended up eventually figuring out I could do little custom tree parts, and I added in with the living wood, living wands, some actuated trees that didn't actually affect the explorability at all, but they added that little extra level of ambience and life and vibrance to the interior, which I think is important there. And then that basically just left the inner two smaller sections of the pillar. Oh, did I do that? That's cool. It looks like I kind of extended the roots of the big supporting trunk down into the monolith, and then just added leaves onto them and converted them into little viney trees. I totally forgot I did that, but that's pretty fun. I like that, actually. Pretty simple small patches of chlorophyte and then again the emerald gemspark, and these ones were all just activated on their own switch inside, so that from the outside I made sure that the walls were thick enough you couldn't see any chlorophyte or anything, but if you go inside and turn the switch on, then you can really start to see the vibrance of it. Oh, you know what I just realized too? This would have been a really good spot to put a gloom statue. I don't think I did, though. If I did, however, then I think I probably missed it in my final count that I did. But I don't think that I did. Unless, if there is, it'd probably be in that first one with the abandoned mining outpost. And that just about wraps up the pillars there. Yeah, the four columns. And then it was time to start thinking about the rest of the storage room. So now that I had the outside columns in place, I kind of used that as an outside reference point that I wanted to set for the storage room to go until. And I kind of just settled on this imaginary boomerang shape, sort of V shape area for the storage room, and generally sketched it out with the DCU. And then I don't know if at this point I could have been using the DCU to remove the background walls. I think I could have, but I had no idea that feature existed. I didn't know you could right click with the DCU to remove background walls. But I remember when I did find that out, I was mind blown and have used that much more often since. Anyway, it was time to start measuring and laying out the precision points once again. So I did a lot of figuring out precise locations, and then basically just calculating slopes out so that I could build nice straight lines and generally get the angular shape that I was going for. However, this does leave like the bottom, or not bottom, but the middle sections where the lines come together. I didn't want just a pointed bottom. I wanted it to be rounded. So what I did is I basically measured at a right angle from the first line that I made, and then I measured length to the center, and I used that length to figure out which then became the radius of the circle I wanted to perfectly round out the bottom of it. And then I went back to the pixel generator tool and used that to build the bottom of the circle. And I think I missed a block or two, but oh, that might be what I did. Maybe I had to move it down one or something. But after I did that, it definitely produced the nice curve that I wanted down at the bottom. So it's a pretty smooth and sweeping curve to connect the two straight outside bottom edges. And then for the top, I just needed a shallower angle. So I figured out what slope I wanted to do for that, and then continued that all the way to the center, where I think I just end it on the purple frame that I had already laid out. Luckily, I had the space between underneath of the ground layer that I had built. It's a little bit closer on the left-hand side over there, but it's close enough to not be a problem. I didn't end up running out of space and having to raise the whole ground up or anything like that. But so that worked out fine. Then I did need to figure out what block design I wanted for the actual structure here. And so I go figure out that with the, I think it's deep green painted obsidian bricks, I wanted to replace all of my outline with. And then what was I know I made it 3 wide. Is it silver? Yeah. Yep, I used silver bricks for the inside layer. And then I think I add more obsidian on the outside here, if I remember right. So figuring out the shape and getting that all right was one of the, it's always one of the kind of, well, I don't know. I want to say it's one of the more time-consuming parts, but that's probably not totally accurate. Maybe it is time-consuming for relative to the amount of blocks you place, because of I always try to make sure that I have everything in the right spot and it lines up perfectly. But some of the other parts, like especially once we get into the interior here and I start designing the pillars that go inside, which I think I might start on pretty quick, although maybe I do first need to figure out the spacing and the organization layout for the chest platforms themselves. Yeah, I probably do that first, huh? Start figuring out how many chests I'm going to fit, how I want to lay them out, and all that. And then I do go ahead and get my universal pylon out so that I can easily jump down here. I'm just barely getting far enough away from the world spawn to allow me to be a little quicker by using the pylon. So I beef up the outside edges a little bit, just add stone so that there's not as much light sneaking through, or if you were to walk along the edge with a torch, you wouldn't see through the other side. You would just see the stone blocks and kind of know that everything was securely secluded in here. So just did kind of a lot of terraforming in here. Didn't take all that much really. But yeah, as far as like time consumption goes, the building of the framework takes a lot of time for how few blocks are placed. But then again, when I get into the pillars on the inside, I spent a lot of time designing the texture and the color and the shape of those, and I end up using a lot of detail with various hammering techniques. So then I did want to play around with a little bit of a different shape for the very corners. I rounded out that the bottom outside corner a little bit, and then I added a interesting little flare up with only on the exterior blocks. Like inside there's still a straight corner there. And honestly, I had totally forgotten I did that. I don't remember seeing that shape in the final build of the storage room. It probably is like that though. I just, since I only run around inside, I only see the straight corner. Unless I do still change it some. Now I'm starting to second guess if did I actually leave those silver bricks like that the whole time? I guess we'll find out. So then I do start figuring out the layout for the chests, basically. So figure out what kind of spacing I want and the platform size and distribution for the chests themselves. And at this point, I still had no idea about my specific organization scheme. All I was doing was trying to, one, have the capacity. So I wanted enough space to have room to grow and store everything I theoretically needed. And then I also wanted it to be efficient but not crowded and packed. So I had sections designated where I could then later better organize the various parts to it. And then the process started on the pillar prototyping. Starting with walls, I was just playing with a bunch of different wall ideas, paint colors, textures, and all this to get different types of shading. And eventually, it didn't take me too long to realize I wanted to go for blocks and actuate them. And I don't know if I had intended that to start with or not, but start messing around with some luminite bricks, crystal blocks, and various prestige looking blocks, I guess. And then I did kind of I added a fair amount of texture and shape to the outside, and then I was able to use that to bring in the background walls here and there to really add another level of depth, and that worked out really well. So yeah, it was just a lot of And I don't remember every block I used, but I do remember a lot of luminite, crystal, and probably some adamantite beams, I believe. And painted everything gray or white or black, and then actuated it so that I wouldn't have collision, obviously, because I didn't want my storage room to be segmented and unapproachable for anyone without a rod of harmony, basically. Oh, right, I used just a little bit of sandstone, I think. Like regular sandstone blocks to add that unique sort of diamond-like shape, and then figured out what kind of paint color to use on them. And in the center here, you will notice instead of the green energy, I've got purple here. So what's up with that? I decided that I would add in some purple to support slash oppose, or support in opposition the green energy from the emerald gemspark. So brought in the amethyst gemspark as well, and just in the center few columns I wanted it to be purple, leading up to the crafting area, which had sort of its own isolated purple effect with the amethyst gemspark, which we will see here before long, the more extreme effects of that I add into the crafting area. But then I go back to the green, the emerald on the outsides, just outside of the center section. Starting to get it figured out, kind of. And then this part was always annoying when like a blood moon would occur, because it changes all of the colors and suddenly I'm not seeing the colors that I'm trying to go for. It's just totally different. And this was before they changed the enchanted sundial, and then later added the enchanted moon dial. But it still had like a global cooldown. It wasn't reset by blood moons, I don't believe, anyway. So I didn't bother. Like nowadays, if a blood moon occurs, I just pop out the sundial, click it, and then I'm good to go. And I know that if another one occurs, it resets it, right? So it's never an issue anymore. But back here, it was I did have to just sort of build through the blood moon. There wasn't that good of a way around it. Zoom in here for the special level of detail. Occasionally I do that, but not very often. I'll actually zoom the screen in, and it does help a lot, especially when I'm working with weird hammer textures. So that's the main thing here. Then I wanted to figure out at the top of the pillar how I could blend it smoothly into a curved support meld into the rest of this the frame that I had already set up. And actually it didn't take me long to figure out some decent little curved texture designs, and throwing in some amethyst gemspark walls behind really added a cool little effect, and it came out pretty good, really. The top part of it, I may make a modification or two. I still hone it in a little bit there. I didn't want kind of that much flare on the inside there, but it works good with just showing now it's symmetrical. So on the outside it curves up further to meet the other curve, and on the inside it just starts to flare out. So works out pretty good. Now that I had basically the framework, the blueprint, that's what I'm trying to think of. For the big pillar, I needed a slightly smaller pillar variation, and so I started designing that up, and went a little bit quicker, I believe, on this one, but sort of same idea, only I was sticking to 5 blocks wide total instead of 7, which I had on the big pillar there. Still, I wanted the glowy effect to it, and this time I did go back to the emerald for the green as we moved outside of directly below the crafting area. And I think I pretty quickly figured out the general design I wanted, so then I just repeated it with the walls and then went back over it with the blocks. And then always, if you can, hammer your blocks before actuating them, because the hammering patterns are usually a lot easier to execute before you actuate the blocks, because after you actuate them, the game doesn't register any adjacent blocks. If there are adjacent blocks but they're actuated, it acts like there are no adjacent blocks. So it'd just be like one block floating in midair, and hammering that, it goes into the half slab, then the bottom corners, and then the top corners. But if you have it adjacent to other blocks, it prioritizes melding with those blocks or blending with them. So oftentimes it'll save you time to hammer before actuation. And now I had both the big and small pillar prototypes done, so I just had to copy them a bunch of times, basically. And at this point, like I was saying earlier, I figure out the block palette, and I can do all of them in at the same stages. So I'll just start with the initial background, plop all that down, get the rest of the walls figured out, and then I can switch over to the blocks, get the blocks in front, get the hammering done, do everything in stages across the board, which made it a lot more efficient in the end. So still though, with the amount of block variation and the hammering detail, and then actuation, it definitely added quite a bit of time to the storage room construction. The only downside to getting your walls placed before hammering the blocks is that it's pretty easy, especially with very fast hammers, to accidentally remove the background walls behind the blocks you're trying to hammer. But I'm actually really surprised. It looks like I've been doing a pretty solid job of the quick single clicks whenever I'm hammering these things so I don't break the background walls. Of course, going at this speed, I might just be missing the times that I do break the walls and have to replace them, but I'm actually pretty impressed because a lot of times I don't get it that good. I'll end up accidentally clicking a little bit looser and breaking the walls. Had the very center pillar, which also was purple. So I guess it's the center 3. There's one center, the middle small one, and then the 2 on the either side are the bigger ones, and those are the purple that flow into the crafting area, and then all the rest are green that alternate big and small, and then flow up into the columns that support the framework. Now I've got the full modular construction in action here. Get all the different wall types down first. Everything's kind of in place. Narrow it down with the Starlit Heaven, which is what I was going to use mainly for the basically all the space in between the columns, I believe. But I do end up with a few different wall variations there, if I remember right. And then get the blocks out, do blocks in front. Simply start with the Luminite bricks, and then slap all those down. Then it's time for the crystal. I guess actually it's the vast majority of blocks in the columns I did were these crystal blocks. So, which, come to think of it, and I wrote it down to in my notes, but especially when I was placing the chests in the storage room, I went with crystal chests, and so I ended up doing like a lot of crystal shard farming in order to get enough crystal blocks to craft the chests and the lighted furniture. I used a ton of lamps, and on top of the blocks that I used in the pillars, I probably used thousands of crystal shards on the storage room, quite easily actually. But I did have to do quite a bit of shard collection in order to finish all of this. Get the little bits of sandstone. And then it was time to figure out the top flared out parts. The top sections were a bit tricky because the spacing of the like pillar modules as they go vertically wasn't always the same when it reached the top of the storage room because of the various slopes and all that. So I kind of had to make up and blend in each of the top curves individually, and they were all kind of unique because of that. But I ended up getting them all to work, but it was a bit tricky. Obviously, once I finished one side, then I was able to copy that over to the other. So then it helped out, but initially, yeah, it took a little bit of extra time to figure out the size and the blending of each of those. And then I was finally able to ready to go back for the main hammering sequence. Get everything done. Obviously still a lot of background walls to polish up between there and everything, and I guess looking at it now, the pillar construction definitely puts the amount of time I spent framing up the shape to shame. But I mean, I did place more blocks and I did more. It's more time, but more actual like working time rather than thinking and measuring and calculating time, I guess. That's the difference. All of the hammering coming out here. It is kind of cool seeing the pillar actually be chiseled out through the hammering process. It really adds way more detail than than it starts off with just this weird blocky arrangement of pretty ugly textures, honestly. How some of them blend together and some of them don't. And then, of course, this is pre-actuation. And once they're actuated, that's when they really come together and sink into place. Try to make sure I get the symmetry on point here. Yeah, I think every time you see my inventory open, that's when I accidentally hammer too much and break the walls behind. So it's not actually that bad, but I definitely did it a few times. What could actually be advantageous for stuff specifically like this is if I were to grab a hammer that was slightly slower, and that way it would be like I'd still have time to do my single or double clicks, but it would be a lot easier not to accidentally start breaking out the walls when I didn't want to. I went ahead and just screenshotted that one side so that I could pull it up and have a reference to go off of instead of flying back and forth a bunch of times. I still did have to fly back and forth a few times though to make sure that things were looking up to scruff. Getting close here. I'm excited for the actuating, both in observation of the time lapse and in real time when I get to that point. It's definitely the most exciting part, and pretty fast too. Looks like it's just about actuation time. I guess I do one of the pillars at a time and then move on. But yeah, you can really see how all the colors actually fit together so much nicer after I actuate them. And just like that, I've got a whole bunch of pillars. So those were finally in place. I guess, how much more do I do? Oh, maybe I do. Oh wow, I might do a lot more tweaking than I realized. And then I needed to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of the interior. So I just grabbed a bunch of different walls and paints that I thought I might use, and pretty quickly figured out the combo that looked good and that I wanted to shoot for. Well, maybe not that quickly. I end up using, I think I end up using waterfall blocks actually, or walls. But I wanted kind of a stripy vertical stripe design that added a little character without being too pronounced. One of the tricks was I did want to sort of highlight the pillars a little bit, so I needed to figure out what block looked the best next to those, or what wall, I guess. Ended up settling on the Ebonstone brick wall to start with, and now that I'm reminded of that, I can't imagine how much Ebonstone brick wall I've used in this world so far. It is well, actually, is it gonna be? I was about to say it's for sure the most abundant wall in the whole build, because, well, I use quite a bit of it here, but I also use a ton of it at the very end in the underground side wings of the display areas. I used a whole ton of it there, and also I think I use a buttload of it in Downfall, in one or two of the levels in that. So I thought when I started thinking about it that it'd be the most abundant, but now that I also realize there's stuff like smooth marble and regular marble that I used as huge filler areas for, well, a lot of it in the 4 supporting columns for the basalt columns that we did at the beginning of this video, but also the larger monoliths that I do to designate the outside edges of the base. Those are all filled with marble, mainly, I guess, and some sandstone, I think. So it's probably between some type of marble wall and the Ebonstone brick walls that are competing for like the most used wall in this world. Alright, and we are finally moving on to the crafting area here. Get started on what type of walls I want to do in that. And I did just pull up my Tigaria log and to look at some of my notes on here. And yeah, I was talking about the crystal furniture that I used, and blocks I guess too, but I went and collected a bunch of crystal shards, and starting with 7,294, I needed to see if that was going to be enough. In the end, I placed 923 chests, and then the lights on top of that, which I don't think cost as many crystals as the chests do, but I still had 2,500 crystal shards to spare. So actually, it didn't take like an absurd amount, but right around just shy of 5,000 crystal shards on the furniture itself, pretty much. So as far as the crafting area goes, though, I figured out how I wanted to lay out the wall design for here. Again, started thinking about different oval and curved shapes that I wanted to try to implement. So with the upper and lower parabola curves, I got the transition down to the storage room below, and then also the opening up to the sky above to kind of establish that transition between surface and underground, I guess. I don't know. And then my idea was to flare out in a fan, kind of curved fan design, a bunch of these glowing lines in the background. And so I went and I was using the pixel circle generator again to create these curves with. But I ended up having a lot of trouble because I wanted them to intersect the outside curves at those specific areas. And I couldn't figure out how to calculate what curve I needed for those. So I thought that there would be a good way if I doubled the width on the oval that I had. Maybe that would do it. But because I was intersecting with a different curved surface, that didn't work. So I ended up kind of just doing it by trial and error, I think, in the end. I just sketched out a few different curves and got them to land roughly where I wanted them to. And the end of it, the end result did turn out pretty good, but it was tricky to come up with to figure out how to make them properly. It also gets a little bit busy, obviously, towards the middle because there's a lot more overlap there. So I think what I do is I end up, well, actually, what do I do? I don't remember for sure. I was gonna say I use some like blocks to hammer and overlay, but I don't think I do that. I guess I'll just have to wait and find out. And then the blood moon comes again, so suddenly the colors look all crazy. I was getting close to having something here, and once I got the first quarter done, then it would be a lot easier to go ahead and copy just the other four, or other three. And so I finally was able to get started on that. But I still needed to sort of figure out what type of, how to free up the mass of like blocks that ended up being towards the center there. Oh, I remember what I did now. I add another oval in the center to sort of cut off all of the lines when they get close to the middle. And then there's a much cleaner cut that isolates the center, allows me to do the main crafting zone, and then looks way better. So that's what I couldn't remember that, but once again we get a blood moon to change up the colors on us. But you can see now that it's, at least at the outside of the curve, it's starting to look pretty cool. We have these radial arches that all come in to intersect towards the center. And yeah, on this side I realized like I was gonna have to do something about the center, so I didn't bother overlapping everything in the very middle and creating a bunch more chaos. Just a lot of ruler work here, measuring and precisely counting out blocks. But now you can see the idea kind of coming together here. And then I had to figure out what width I wanted to try and make a new curve in the center to cut out all the chaos. And so start measuring up for that, and I think that's probably what I do next here. Yep. Come up with a really wide curve, and that allows me to cleanly start the radial lines outside of that. Still not too sure about the block choice and the color, so I'm messing around with that quite a bit here. And then I end up cutting over with both the top and the bottom arches, so they have final priority. And then I bring that center pillar up a little bit further, have more space to extend that. And then it was on to basically start figuring out the chest layout, I think. Yeah. My temporary storage and crafting work area at the spawn castle gradually expanded more and more until I finally was able to move into the main one here. So I figured out the platform spacing, and then just basically put as many platforms as I could fit in to figure out how much rough space I would have. And then I was able to break that space down and designate it to different sections. Continuously buying more paint from the painter. The painter on this world is probably one of the richest painters that I've ever had, at least. Although there is quite a bit of the time where I don't actually buy the paint off of this world. I go back to my main playthrough world, because on that world the painter's living in the desert with the dye trader who he likes, and so the paint is at a better price, although not as good of a price as if he was in the jungle with the dryad. I think that would probably be the best case scenario. But either way, paint is not very expensive, so I wasn't too concerned about it. So at this point I had taken a big break and figured out what I wanted to organize where and roughly how much space to allocate to each section. And so I came back, started building the section headlines, labeling the different areas, and oh, did I actually leave those floating up there? I don't think I left any statues floating with in midair, but we'll see. Basically, yeah, just a lot of organization in the background here. Got the funk furniture, the decor, and then lights and various themed furniture sets. It was kind of a guess on what how much space to put for each section, but I mean, as of now, I'd say I did a pretty decent job overall, because it's still working pretty good for me. I will say a couple things that I kind of left out space for could be like the miscellaneous certain things like kites or weird tool types and consumables like the dry bombs and that stuff. I do have explosives, but the weird tool type items and just the weird miscellaneous stuff like unicorns on a stick, I do have trouble placing. So there are a few things that I do wish, like consumables, like boss summoning items. There are just a few niche types of categories that I still struggle with, and then I put them somewhere, like I'll put them in the golf section or something because I have room there, and then I forget about it and can't find them. So there are a few small issues, but the broadly it does work pretty good. generally at this point I felt pretty good about the layout, so added in some item frames for the specific smaller sections. I was able to use statues to add character to the main headers, which was nice. And then got out the lights and got all those in place. used quite a few lights. Yeah. It's definitely a bit over the top, I'd say, with the lights. But I did add light switches and stuff, so you can turn them all off. Which currently, I since completion, I've never had the lights on because it's just too much, and the glowing effect from the pillars is more than enough to see the sections, the headers and stuff, the labels. But also, which we'll get to here shortly, I added my favorite part of the whole storage system is my highlight switches. So in that center part right to the left and right here, I add in some switches to highlight major sections of the storage room. So if you're in there, you can just go, okay, I'm looking for armor. You can go to the armor switch, turn it on, and then fly down, and it'll highlight the whole armor section. And that works out really cool. And functionally, I don't use it personally because I know where everything is at this point because I've been using it. But for other people exploring, hopefully it can be helpful and fun to interact with. Added in the aesthetic wiring here. Just to get a little teleporter action so that I could quickly get from one side to the other. Play around with the spacing slightly for the player sensor, but I think I got it to work. Unless I do end up just going with a pressure plate in the end. What the heck? I was getting logic lamps out? Logic gates? Oh. Oh, right. There was a weird thing where... oh. What the heck? I think I skipped placing all of the chests. I must have forgot to record while I placed the chests. Anyway, looks like all the chests are in, and then it was time to do some labeling. So I grabbed 2 of every item that I wanted to use for the label for the smaller sections to put in the item frames. So I ended up doing that in. But anyway, yeah, with the teleporters, the player sensor doesn't actually actuate or activate the teleporters, so I had to add a logic gate in between so that the logic gate, which turns on by the player sensor, then activates the teleporter and teleports you. Kind of weird, but then we have the actual crafting area. Had the design all made up on my grid that I sketched out, and then just had to figure out how to get all the crafting pieces in there without messing something up and breaking the whole thing. It is a pretty delicate area because half the items are just floating there. And then one of the cool things that turned out nice is that I just painted over all the items to blend them in with the background texture and the wall design. And that actually added a pretty cool effect, hiding a lot of the... It makes it so it doesn't stand out much at all. But if you look for it, you can tell what items are what. And then I added in the unique crafting stations, the special furniture stations on the outside here. I got all the weird combinations. We have table and chair, workbench and chair, the bookcase, and then the auto hammer and stuff like that. Oh, and even the campfire, that's right. You gotta be able to roast marshmallows. And then I needed the crystal ball next to honey, water, and lava. So I have that in here, right up in the corner. That works out okay. And then I do have a special little potion brewing section. So that's what I put right here is I wanted to add potions and food items all within reach of a couple of chests, so that I could easily brew any potion and cook any food that I wanted to. So all the food and potion crafting items and stations go over there. That worked out pretty good. Again, with the painting, I can kind of blend them in and hide them into the design. That way my curved glowing design really still pops out and isn't covered up by any of the furniture items, which is nice. Had to add some more lighting in, and then I did have to extend the spiral staircases down to meet the curve, and this way it is technically possible to explore without any mobility accessories. You can go up and down from this whole section, but it is kind of tricky. There's some parts where I added like black painted platforms so that you couldn't see them, but they are not very easily. They're not echo painted at least, but they do blend in so they don't affect the visuals of the design at all. And here's where I had to figure out a pattern for the general platform arrangement, which I ended up going just pretty simple 3 wide platforms in sort of a line, and that'll allow new characters to be able to jump around without any issues. And then again, I can paint them to blend in so they don't really affect the look that much. Then I started working on my label idea, so my highlight switches. Actually, now I'm already able to use the crafting area, which is quite nice. And pretty soon, I don't think I have yet, but I take a big break and move all of my inventory, or most of it, from my other world onto here. Yeah, so there's those highlight switches that I was talking about. And then, here's the other part. So there's actually quite a few unique crafting stations, including the demon altar. But not only the demon altar itself, but you have the whole ecto mist. That's what it's called. So ecto mist is involved in quite a lot of unique crafting. So I went and found the closest demon altar, and the location of this actually did end up moving later on, but added a teleporter system to quickly get between them. And then I added all the ecto necessary stations in here on top of the demon altar, of course, and that provided the rest of the crafting stations that I couldn't realistically include in the center, like the demon altar. I had to do something about that. And then ectomist, I didn't want ectomist infiltrating my whole storage room, so it was nice to be able to have another option to include that, which, now that I'm thinking about it, this design of the demon altar crafting area. Oh, it did. Okay. I was starting to wonder if it even included the ectomist, if I had misremembered and that wasn't even a thing yet, but I think it is. I think I place gravestones over there. Because they must have added ectomist in like 1.4, right? Yeah, they did. So there. Got the ectomist going and pretty much laid out the special demon altar inclusion. So yeah, that worked out pretty good. Again, I did have to end up moving this later because I ended up expanding the base to include this part. But, or actually, wait. I don't remember if it included that part exactly or if I just didn't want the overlap visually when you went to one place or the other. Then I filled out my nice little label signs for the overall organization. So I got that kind of laid out. Anyone who comes on can relatively quickly find what items they're looking for. The sort of miscellaneous column with temporary storage, loot items, fish, dye, and all that. Then it was time to start hooking everything up with wiring, so getting the lights to work was, especially for the highlight switches, I actually spent quite a bit of time figuring that out, but overall there's just kind of, there are kind of a lot of lights, obviously, so I used a lot of wire hooking all of them up. Finally able to turn the lights off now, which is much easier on the eyes. So I think I leave them off for a lot of the time. And here I go adding the special sections for the highlight switches. It's really simple. Basically, there's a master switch that connects to all of the lights in all the sections, and then the highlight switches just each go to their own section. So there's not like a smart system that detects whether or not certain lights are on and then highlights. Basically, if the master switch is on, then the highlight switches will turn off and on the lights. But if the master switch is off, like I normally keep it, then the highlight switches turn on and then off the sections that you want to look at. So it works just fine for me. Now that I have played around a little bit more with logic gates, it probably wouldn't be that hard. I'm sure to some people it'd be the simplest thing ever to just wire it up so that there's some smartness to it. But for me, just the regular highlight works pretty good. So got that going. You'll notice I also remembered to dodge the chest statues with the wiring, so I didn't accidentally start spawning mimics in. Might have happened on accident. I don't remember. Oh, and then do I redesign the crafting area, or do I I might just have to rebuild it because I accidentally broke it or something. No, I think I might redesign it because I forgot to add in like the void vault and the safe, possibly the defender's forge. But I definitely wanted all four of those, so we got defender's forge, the vault, the piggy bank, and the void vault now. Got all those fitting in here, and then rebuilt the rest of the crafting stations around it. Then I had to go back and repaint everything, but overall definitely packed a lot more in there, I think, this time. Then oh, what's this? I think that actually concludes the storage and the crafting section, but I forgot that I took a little break after that to just polish up the rest of the center area by adding bits of plants and furniture. I cleaned up my my pyramid, which originally was, I think, completely covered on World Gen, but went through, exposed that, polished it up, and cleaned everything. So this was basically wrapping up the what I called Tigaria Part 1. Is that right? Yep, Tigaria Part 1. Basically, I get the storage room and crafting area functionally done, and the center hub is in place with everything there to introduce you to the world, but no display areas in place yet. So I just had to go back and polish up and add little bits of textures for plants and furniture as much as I could, and yeah, basically finished up the functional core of Tigaria. So from this point onward, I could basically work out of this world, which helps quite a lot, not having to hop worlds, have all my inventory in place, get all that working, and then of course the crafting is a big part of that. So I guess wiring up the whole center core also took a little bit of time because I hadn't done any of that before. I had to figure out where exactly I wanted the light switches and what circuits I wanted different light sections to be on and all of that type of stuff. So that took a little bit of time as well. Not too much, obviously, but went through, did all the small buildings individually, had the center done, and then once I had the lights off, it actually was a lot of fun to zoom out, look at the full picture, take a couple of pictures, play with the monolith effects as well. I definitely had a lot of fun with that. But overall, that I think pretty much wraps up the thing here. Oh no, I do add this. So I guess the only other thing that I do end up adding is the two sort of display wings, I suppose. There's two hanging down wings off of the platforms for the main frame, and they go between the monolith things, whatever you call them, the columns on the outside. And then my idea originally was to just have item frames in here, and they would display the pets and the mounts. But I quickly realized I wanted to do dedicated builds for those. And I ended up converting these into just informational signs that continued my in-game version of my building log that I kept. So it actually worked out good in the end, but yeah, this is me just framing in this big dropped down section with basically a bunch of room for item frames is what I had, but I ended up converting it to signs later on. But this is the last little piece that I have for quote Tigaria Part 1, which basically, like I said, functionally wraps up the core of the functionality for the base. And then we moved on from there, but I'll let you guys enjoy the last little bits of the time lapse for this episode. Just finish up these wings here, not too much to it. And then I will be back for the next section here. So thanks a bunch for watching and for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have an outstanding rest of your day.